Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Just before we get to the interesting business of the evening, I'm just going to do a few domestics for you. We're not expecting any kind of fire drill or fire alarm this evening, but if the alarm does go off, we need to evacuate. There's a fire exit here, which you can go back down the stairs and then back out through the gate to the rear car park, or back through the way that you came in and down the stairs. If anybody's got any concerns or worries about stairs, any mobility issues, then phone myself or Kate at the back and we will help you. We are going to be live on the World Wide Web this evening, and that's why we've got microphones. So you will have an opportunity to ask questions later, and we would ask you to go and use the microphone. However strong you feel your voice is, it won't be picked up by the web streaming unless you use the microphone. So we'd be grateful if you could do that for us. And finally, if you haven't found them already, ladies and gents, out the door that you came in and the corridor in front of you has got a sign to the ladies, the gents and the disabled toilets. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Heather Goddard and I chair the Safer and Stronger Partnership for South Gloucestershire. And I've been asked to welcome you all here today. I'd like to welcome Sue Mank-Stevens, our Police Crime Commissioner, Nick Gargan, who is the Chief Constable, and Chief Superintendent Jeff Spicer, who is the District Commander for this particular area. And of course to all of you, because without you here we wouldn't have a meeting tonight. It's appropriate that we meet here in our recently refurbished building in Kingswood, which is right in the middle of a priority neighbourhood for Kingswood. Kingswood has not been without some problems in the past, and I'm delighted to say to you that through effective policing, targeting prolific offenders, we have reduced the crime in this area by 22%. In South Gloucestershire, generally, we have 2,075 less victims of crime, a 14.2% reduction in crime, a 13% reduction in criminal damage, and the surveys that we have recently done has shown that people have public confidence to continue to improve our communities, and we have been successful in dealing effectively with antisocial behaviour. As a council, we work hard to look at graffiti and fly tipping because we believe a green environment is one which gives people confidence and they make them feel safer. And this is despite the fact that we, like the police and other partners, have a reducing budget all the time. So it is easy. However, those were good figures and we are very proud of them, but we won't be complacent because there is still a lot more to do, as I'm sure you'll hear this evening. I look forward to another challenging year and working closely with the Police Crime Commissioner to provide effective services for this community. We're delighted that Sue Mank-Stevens actually agreed within 3 weeks of being elected as the Police and Crime Commissioner that she actually attended our Safer and Stronger Partnership meeting. And we're pleased to continue, hopefully, with a positive relationship in our partnership. I'll now finish because the meeting is not about me, it is about the important people here on my left that you want to hear, and I hope you have a very productive evening.
Thank you. Can everyone hear? And if I suddenly sort of stop speaking because I've moved the mic too far away, could you wave to me? And I'll try not to wave back, but I'll remember what I'm doing up here.
First of all, good evening and thank you. And as Heather has so eloquently said, thank you all for making the effort to come here, because without you being here, it would be an empty room. But it's really important that in order to drive what I am trying to do as the Police and Crime Commissioner, making the police more open, more transparent, it's really important that you come and ask us questions. So I'm really delighted that there are so many of you here. This is our third public forum, and it's really useful for us to be able to listen to what you have to say, and if we're not able to answer all your questions, then we will take them away and we will get back to you, and that's a guarantee. A little bit about me, as your Police and Crime Commissioner. I stood for election in November, which was a pretty scary moment for me. I've never stood for anything before in my life, but I was absolutely convinced that this role should not be held by a party politician. I believe that being independent is absolutely key to being a Police and Crime Commissioner, and having got 10 months under my belt, it's even more important, because I want the only people to be pulling my strings to be the residents of Avon and Somerset. I do not want my strings pulled by Whitehall government or any other party. So I can assure you that the residents of Avon and Somerset have my complete and utter dedication for the 3.5 years that I am here. This is my tenure. But why did I decide to run? Well, my background is, for some of you, particularly in Kingswood, I was part of a bakery business that we had on Fishponds Trading Estate, and had various shops in Regent Street and in King's Chase. In fact, I think one of my first jobs as a Saturday girl, when my dad let me, was to be part of the coffee shop in Regent Street. But I have also been a magistrate. I was a magistrate for 15 years on the youth, adult and the family bench. I was on the independent monitoring board at Bristol Prison, and I was a member of the police authority. So you can see I have a real interest in policing and the criminal justice system. But what does a Police and Crime Commissioner do? Well, there's various roles. I appoint a Chief Constable and hold them to account. I set out a police and crime plan based on local priorities, which I will tell you a bit more about. I set the annual local precept, that's the policey part of the council tax precept, and I commission the community safety services. But there are two specific areas that I do want to highlight, is that I am your public voice. Okay, I am making sure that what you want the police to hear, I give that extra emphasis. So that's why I'm very much your Police and Crime Commissioner. And I want to, and I've made it my mission, is that I want to listen to the quiet voices. I want to listen to the people who are usually below the radar. There's lots of people who know how to lobby people like me, but it's really important that I go out and I listen to those people who don't normally make a fuss. And for many of those are in the majority. I am increasingly doing this, and I've had, since I've been in post, I've had over 3,000 people who've contacted me. And if you compare that to the police authority, which I replaced, the police authority had 260 contacts in 1 year, and as I say, I've had well over 3,000 so in the last 10 months. So you can see that there's a real hunger for people to get involved with a Police and Crime Commissioner, of which I'm delighted. But I have a broader remit than just policing. I'm actually also emphasis on the joint working with the criminal justice partners. So not only is it on the police part, but it's also on crime prevention, the police part, and then the criminal justice system, which includes the courts, probation, and the prisons. So I have a very wide remit. I also have a direct responsibility for commissioning community safety services, and in particular next year for the drug referral services I will be commissioning, and from 2014 I will be also commissioning services for victims. Furthermore, I have spent most of the summer with many of my team talking to as many people as possible about the council tax, the police part of the council tax budget for next year. And it's one of the key decisions I have to make in the next 6 months about what is the level of council tax that I can need to raise. As you know, the financial position for all public sector agencies that Heather referred to is that there are serious cuts. Now, we've already experienced, police have already experienced that we've had to make cuts of £35 million. Okay. Now, remember that the police have done this, and crime is still coming down, and detection rates are still going up. So, against a background of 35 million, I think you will appreciate how well the police are doing. But we've now been asked to make a further £15 million cuts over the next 2 years. So you will see some forms that have been distributed, and I would appreciate that as many people as possible answer that and give me their views on what they think they can afford and what they want to afford, because I want to be as open and honest as I can about this. It's not something we're going to hide. I want to explain to people. So you'll have some paperwork there. There's also on the website, and if you want to talk about this later with any of me or my team, then I'm very happy to do so. Well, I have been in post for 10 months, so what have I been up to? Well, we had the first statutory police and crime plan, which we published in March 12, 2013. And just to make life a little bit more difficult, I also wanted to publish local police and crime plans. One of the things that came across very clearly from residents is that one-size policing does not fit all. Policing in South Gloucestershire is different to policing in Yeovil, Minehead and Bath. So it is important that we listen very closely to local people. So we have made 6 local plans, of which again we have some copies available here, and again you can get them on our website. And we did an extensive consultation process where I had over 2,000 people who came who gave me their views, and they reaffirmed the 4 core priorities that I had actually campaigned on, which was 1, reducing the impact of antisocial behaviour in the community. I never went to any meeting that antisocial behaviour was never raised. Tackling domestic and sexual violence, particularly violence towards women and children. Preventing and reducing burglary and the fear of burglary, and then putting victims at the heart of the criminal justice system. And in addition, the residents who responded, they also raised issues such as road safety, visibility and relationships with the police, which have now been added into the police and crime plan. I also receive a community safety grant. This is from the Home Office, and for this year that was £2.4 million, which was to be used to fund community safety activities. We work very closely with partners, particularly community safety partnerships, which I think are absolutely vital, because those partnerships are the ones who are listening very closely to street level, and I will continue to emphasise how important they are. And we made various, not rules, but certainly suggestions that we wanted to continue what was happening, what would have happened in the past, so that no one fell off a cliff edge. We would fund projects and outcomes, not posts. But people had to be very clear on their business plans. I am absolutely convinced that what I am doing is making sure that taxpayers' money is spent very, very wisely. And if there is not evidence to support that something is happening, I have to be very clear with you that I will not support it. I need evidence that it is being successful, and it has to be measured. We can't just fund things because they are nice to have. There's just not enough money to go round. This fund has seen South Gloucestershire benefit from over £80,000, which will go towards a domestic violence empowerment group, a hate incidents response service, a youth outreach programme, and substance misuse support services. In addition to that, in May, I launched the Community Action Fund, which was a fund of £200,000, which was available in this year to enable communities to come forward. A lot of communities and residents groups that I went out to see told me that only for a small amount of money they had great projects, they had great ideas, and they could get them up and running. And so we've established a fund where the grants are available for up to £5,000, where you don't have to run through loads of hoops for it, but it's just a matter of maybe buying that extra bit of kit that people can't quite raise the money for, and so that's what we've done. And this fund is administered by the Police Communities Trust, and we make decisions about that quarterly. And there have been several local groups in South Gloucestershire that have benefited from this. There's money gone towards South Gloucestershire's Disability and Equality Network, and various youth club support groups and the Creative Youth Networks. So if you are part of a local group or organisation that could benefit from funding, then please do apply for this fund. Other key initiatives that I'm working on is that I've established an independent residents panel to look at complaints against the police. Speaking and listening to residents, residents have been very clear that they do not like police marking their own homework as far as regarding complaints. So we've set up an independent residents panel to dip sample, to look at complaints and to give advice about where things can be improved. And for that I will be publishing on a website their reports, so you can be able to see that on a regular basis. I've also established a business crime and business crime forum and a rural crime forum to look at the impact on local businesses as well as in the rural areas. Having asked the Chief Constable to look at PCSO powers, I can confirm that he looked at this and that PCSOs now have the power to detain and search outer clothing. Again, this was something that was very clear, that came to me from residents, that's what they wanted. And following several phone-ins on Radio Bristol and other radio stations and emails, I'm fully aware of the concerns regarding cycling, parking on pavements and other antisocial behaviour issues in South Gloucestershire, and I take these issues very seriously indeed and are included in the local South Gloucestershire plan. I am committed to spending at least one day out in the community, and these days provide me with valuable insight into organisations. It is not for people to come to me sitting up on my ivory tower. It is for me to go out and listen to whatever groups that want to talk to me. And over the last few visits I visited the Hannam Friday Night Project, Southern Brooks Community Partnerships, Brent Knoll House, Chase and King's Forest Community Projects. And in fact I'm next out in South Gloucestershire on October the 8th. So if you'd like to have a look at my online events calendar to see where I shall be, I'm very happy to if you want to have visits to organise with my team. And finally, I would like to speak about police officer conduct and integrity. Police officers do a very important and a very difficult job. They have special powers in order to carry out these jobs, and we expect high standards of them. I do not believe in witch hunts against police officers or of second-guessing reasonable judgments with the help of hindsight. Obviously, with hindsight, we're all geniuses. But I do expect honesty and integrity from all officers, and I think the public should expect transparency and how officers are dealt with when they break the law. And this will be given, with the Chief and myself, high priority going forward. So I do hope that you find this forum useful, and I look forward to your questions. So now I'd like to hand over to Nick Gargan, Chief Constable for Avon and Somerset.
Thank you, Sue, and good evening, everybody. I'm glad that Sue reminded us that we're live on the internet, and indeed the clicking of the shutter to my left also reminds me that we're on the record and capable of being quoted in the press. If only I'd remembered that last time when we met at Lochleys, and I was giving a bit of a briefing to everybody about what was going on, and kind of absent-mindedly said, oh yes, and we've got the Badger Cull coming up in August. And the next evening I switched on the BBC Points West at 6:30, and they said, oh, the Chief Constable seems to have let slip the date of the Badger Cull. One of those things that I thought, oh, did I really say that? Although I was only really indicating that it was going to happen generally in the summer at some point, but I shall be more careful this evening. More careful particularly because we're having a busy time with the press at the moment, you'll have seen, of course, the press were very interested in the terrible fire we had at our firearms training centre. That was, it's so frustrating. It's such a great centre. So much hard work's gone into it. The builders have been in there for 51 weeks on site when the blaze started, and we were due to take possession of the the centre at the beginning of January, with a view to training our Avon and Somerset officers alongside Gloucestershire officers and Wiltshire officers. And by combining the efforts of the three forces, we'd save money in the training function so that we could preserve the front line. Now the work continues. We'll continue to collaborate with other forces, but it's a major setback. The other things that we've been dealing with in the press this week, you've probably seen the appointment of a PCSO with a misconduct finding against him into the regular force has been a source of considerable controversy, and we've been trying to strike a balance there in understanding decisions that have been made by good people in good faith, even if they're decisions which at first sight look a little odd, and then just balancing out that at what point do you accept that somebody who's made a mistake has done sufficient to put that mistake right, or do we say to people, if you make a mistake in your life, that's it, there's never a way back? And we've had to exercise some more judgment on that and explain our position publicly, whilst on the other hand retaining the confidence of all the communities we serve, including minority communities, of course. So that's made for a tricky week. And then Sue mentioned integrity at the end. I'll mention it in a few moments as well. But obviously the press applied a degree of pressure using their powers under the Freedom of Information Act to demand information from us, and asked me this week whether I would name officers who've been charged with criminal offences. And I decided, given that the information they were asking had already been in the public domain, this was simply helping them to track information down, and given that we all have a right to expect high standards of our police officers, it seemed to me that it was an eminently reasonable request, and for that reason I was very happy to share the information with the Bristol Post, although I'm surprised, frankly, that the editor elected to publish as much of it as he did. I think some of it, people who've been acquitted and acquitted a little while ago, it's for the editor to decide, not me. And I've said in my letter, you know your responsibilities under the Defamation Act. But I think the important thing is that we're open, and we were. So a busy time, and I thought I'd just talk for a few minutes about three things that are preoccupying me in a slightly longer term. The first of which is money, and Sue mentioned the overall financial position of the constabulary. We were a little while ago an organisation of 3,300 plus officers. We now have rather fewer than 2,900 officers. We know that there are further cuts coming, as Sue explained, and we're working out how best to make those cuts. We've seen similar reductions across other categories of staff, and while we remain a big organisation, there are nearly 6,000 people in Avon and Somerset Constabulary, when you add in the officers, the support officers, the special constabulary, the police staff, and others, nearly 6,000 people, and I prefer generally to focus on what those 6,000 can do rather than what we're missing from the people who've gone. We do know we nevertheless will continue to shrink and will contract over the next couple of years, and we're having this sensible grown-up discussion with Sue as Police and Crime Commissioner about what she may do precept-wise in the future. But we are asking fewer and fewer people to maintain levels of safety in our communities, and I'm unsure how much further we can go on that. Our approach to money is to try and take the cash out of policing in the places which have the least impact on service delivery. So those of you who are closely involved with the police may have noticed that a little while ago we took the Chief Superintendent out of South Gloucestershire and asked Jeff here just to work twice as hard and cover Bath and North East Somerset and South Gloucestershire too. Delighted to report he's doing a very good job, and it doesn't seem to be taking a toll on him. He's looking very well on it. And we made the same request of one Chief Superintendent in Somerset to cover the work of three, and we've tried to make those savings by taking senior posts out so we can leave junior people at the front line delivering services to our communities. Similarly, where we can make our building estate more efficient, we'll do that. We'll close down over large, underused, middle-sized buildings and replace them with smaller buildings in the heart of communities. And we're opening up at Keynsham, at Patchway and at Bridgewater, big centres where we'll be able to work very efficiently. And so what you'll see in our estate over the months and years ahead is fewer middle-sized buildings, those kind of things that really do look like police stations that are, generally speaking, past their sell-by date. A small number of very large centres that will be able to operate very efficiently, and increasing numbers of very small local footprints. And that's my aspiration, and one that I've discussed with Amanda Deeks here in South Gloucestershire, and indeed with Joe Farrer in Bath and North East Somerset, the two chief executives. My aspiration is that we should try and merge public services in together, so that we're spending our money on people and services, not on expensive buildings. And there are places where we've done that, and we've had considerable success. The second area after money is performance. The performance of the organisation is important. Even though we're seeing budgets reduce, it is important that we continue to drive crime down. And as Sue has said, we focus our efforts towards those priority areas that she has given to us as your elected representative, and we're seeing some pleasing results. I won't go into performance in detail now, because Jeff has a presentation and he'll give you the very clear, detailed picture about local crime trends, and I won't duplicate that. And then when you ask questions, we'll operate a cascade system where you can ask me a question, I'll shrug my shoulders, I'll pass it to Jeff, he'll shrug his shoulders, it then goes along to Norman, who will be pressing into action, and round, and finally it'll be Rachel, who actually knows the answer. So we'll do that in question and answer. But the performance of the organisation is really important. But also, when we talk, we're very good at 16% this, 32% that, year on year, up and down. I think it's worth pausing and reflecting on what's happened in the very, very long term. Because actually, over a decade and beyond, the risk of being a victim of crime in this area and in every area across this force area has fallen dramatically. The risk of having somebody break into your house, the risk of having somebody break into your car, the risk of having somebody rob you in the street, the risk of having somebody steal your car, etc., have all fallen away dramatically, and all sit at less than half, some much less than half of that previous level. And then the third area, beyond money and performance for me, is a challenge which I embrace wholeheartedly as the new Chief Constable, is one of culture. The culture of the organisation is something that, whilst much of police culture is actually very good, police are great at mucking in, when there's a crisis, we've got a load of can-do people who will all pitch in together, work extremely hard. There is something about police culture that I think needs to change. Something, we have a reputation, and I guess, I pray and aid this discussion that we've had with the Bristol Post about whether we should release details of officers who've been charged as an example of a culture that's a little bit too closed, a little bit insular, a little bit wary of the outside, a culture, a police organisation that tends to be inward-looking. We talk to each other in our own language, with our own acronyms, sometimes a language that people outside of policing really struggle to understand. And I think that it's time we did something about that culture. I got this job on the back of repeatedly saying through the selection process that it was time to throw open the doors of Avon and Somerset Constabulary. And decisions like the one to release details of officers charged with those offences to the Bristol Post, decisions like the ones that we make to continually make ourselves available to explain what we're doing to the press and to community groups, are reflective of a genuine desire to operate in a more open and transparent way, where rather than just tell people, don't worry about it, it's all confidential, we know what we're doing, leave us to it, actually we will operate in a way that is more consultative and that asks more questions of the communities we serve, because those communities are our employers. So, for example, when we've been asked questions in the last few weeks about the way we recruit people, rather than answer them internally with our own personnel HR experts, what we've chosen to do is bring in an external independent reviewer to review our selection processes for us. And even awaiting the results of that review, we're bringing in external voices to validate the way that we actually select officers, the tests we put them through. I'm going to be promoting some people to sergeant and inspector in the next few months, and every promotion panel will have a member of the community sitting on that panel, so that if an officer, well respected by their peers perhaps, appears on a panel but is talking in a form of gobbledygook and acronym and police speak that nobody outside will understand, we'll have somebody on the panel to say, I'm sorry, you may think they were good, but I didn't understand a word they said. And it's all part of the process of making the organisation more transparent, more open, and more responsive. The last thing I'll say is I'll tell you what I tell operational officers every time I speak to them, and I make it my business to get out and about a lot as chief and see operational staff. And I tell them that from my perspective there are three things that matter. I think if there are three things that if they stick to them, they won't go far wrong. And the first of them is integrity. I think it was Sir David O'Dowd, who was one of the chief inspectors of constabulary, back at the end of the 90s, he wrote a report as an inspector of constabulary about police integrity. And he said, there can be no more basic requirement of a member of a police service than that they are honest and that they act with integrity. And that's absolutely right. And sometimes, you know, the service and our people, because through this police culture, they build this really strong bond with colleagues. Sometimes we need to remind every one of our staff that you are an individual, you are accountable individually to the law, and you've sometimes just got to be brave. And sometimes you've got to turn around to colleagues, and sometimes you've got to stand up on your own 2 feet and do things that will be unpopular and tell the truth, even when the truth sometimes will work against your personal interests. And that integrity of policing is critically important, because without it, we're nothing. The second of the three things I talk to staff about is hard work. I know it's boring and it's not very clever management speak, but actually just people sticking in, getting the job done, doing today's work today, doing what victims expect of us, as hard as it is on those awfully boring, routine, midweek, foggy, rainy November evenings when everything that's coming your way is something you've dealt with before and it's not very exciting and not very sexy and not very interesting. Actually working hard and finishing your work is one of the critically important things that our officers need to do. And then the third thing is about treating people fairly and with respect, and just talking to every citizen, even the ones who haven't taken every opportunity they've had in life, even people who are difficult to deal with, even people who like to push back and criticise the police and are unimpressed with the officer they're dealing, even with people who just aren't helping themselves. Every single citizen deserves our protection and our respect and deserves to be treated in a way that we'd like to see a member of our family treated. And those three things I say to officers, you know, if you act with integrity, if you work hard and do your best, and if you treat people fairly and with respect and speak to them in a language they understand, you won't go far wrong. I've been chief here for 6 months, tomorrow as it happens, and I said at the time when I was recruited that there is no way I'm going to leave before my 5-year contract is up. So I've made a very, very firm commitment. I'd quite like to stay a bit beyond the end of that, but 5 years is the duration of the contract. And you know, you can expect me to be very consistent throughout those 5 years, talking about those things, talking about that way of treating people, talking about how we might move on the culture of the constabulary, the organisation, and listening to what you have to say and your feedback about how well we're doing it. And that's all I wanted to say. I think I'm going to pass on now to the aforementioned Chief Superintendent Jeff Spicer, the man now doing 2 jobs, doing them both very well, and he's going to tell you about the local crime and performance picture for the North East area of Avon and Somerset Police.
Thank you, Nick. It's always very nice when your Chief Constable tells you you're doing very well, but the people who judge whether we do very well are you, the public. In fairness, you'll tell me if I'm doing very well if the staff that I lead, the police officers that I lead, deliver the service that you require. And I guess just as Sue did a short introduction about herself, you're probably asking yourself, well, who's this guy who's just taken over this job, taken over to basic command units? what I ought to tell you is that I'm actually 28 and I started this with a head of dark hair, and in 4 months this is what it's done to me. The reality of that is actually I've been policing in Avon, Somerset for over 29 years. I'm born and bred in this city. My family live here in South Gloucestershire. My children went to school here. My daughter's still at school in South Gloucestershire. And for my sins, I actually went to school at Whitfield Comprehensive, which is now the City Academy just down the road. Reason for telling you that? Because this is my city. This is an area that I know very well, and an area that I care passionately about the policing service we deliver here. But I've looked at some of the questions which have already been posed to us and are going to be asked of us, and that's why I've asked the local policing team to sit on my right-hand side, because actually they're the guys who will answer your questions. They're the guys who deliver that service and know most accurately about what that looks like in your area. So Norman Pascal here leads in this local policing area in South Gloucestershire. Alongside him is Don Graham, who's the neighbourhood inspector for this area, and right next to him is Rachel Hodge, who's the actual sergeant who really does deliver the work on the ground here in Kingswood. But we'll talk about some of the issues a bit wider across South Gloucestershire if we can. The graphic up in front of you there actually just demonstrates the police area as it is at the moment in Avon and Somerset. And the next slide will just highlight to you the area which is now the North East policing area. And as Nick's described, that actually is Bath in North East Somerset and South Gloucestershire. And you can see how neatly we sit together. There's a lot in the demographics of the two areas, and in the geography, and actually in the policing style across those two areas, which lends itself to this style of policing. And again, just highlighted for you at the top there is the policing area, which is South Gloucestershire, in the blue band right at the very top, and it's the light blue section. You go on to the next slide, if you would. And again, that's just an expansive shot of South Gloucestershire. What I should tell you is it covers 200 square miles. There's a population living here of just over 250,000 people. You have 3 safer, stronger neighbourhood areas, all serviced by the stations that you see in front of you there. The main police stations at the moment, Chipping, Stodbury, Filton and Kingswood. I have 253 police officers working in this area, 52 police staff, 48 PCSOs, 11 of those are funded by the local authority, which is not the case in all areas around the force. It's only Bristol in South Gloucestershire who independently fund a number of the PCSOs that work in our communities here. We're also supported by 72 special constables as volunteers, 28 police cadets, and I can see a couple around the room today, which I'm delighted to see here, young people working alongside us, and 19 volunteers who also support us through that. If we just go to the next couple of slides, you'll see the response bases for this area. Response bases, patrol bases, where you'll see response officers coming out and attending your most critical calls. At Thornbury, at Concord House and at Stable Hill. I know there's some anxiety about the station at Thornbury, and Nick alluded to how we're going to move away from some of that estate. The Thornbury police station is being sold at the moment, but we're keeping a neighbour policing base out at Thornbury and Castle Street in some premises there that the local authority have made available to us. Our absolute intention, if I show you the next slide, this begins to show some of those community posts, the posts in orange, where actually we've got officers working very closely. You can see the basic Cribs Causeway, the basic UWE, but the other police posts which are there at Willowbrook Centre in Bradley Stoke, the Britain Railway Station at Doddington Parish Hall, the Greenfield Centre in Winterbourne, at Hanham Folk Centre, Ulverston Village Hall, E8 Fire Station, and the final two are one at Patchway Community Centre and one at Peelman Post Office. And why do I show those to you? Because sometimes people ask, and you cry out for visibility of your police service, and sometimes it looks like we've gone away, but we're not. We're right in the heart of your communities. We've got police officers and police staff working in these outposts right into our communities. The other thing I want to say, just as we talk about police stations, the police station at Stable Hill I know causes some anxiety. That site is being sold, but we'll retain yet again another neighbour policing post on exactly the same site. So the neighbour policing team will still operate from the old Stable Hill police station. We're also moving through a mobile data project, because actually if officers are to be visible I want them not actually in police stations, but out and about in our communities. Mobile data means we're going to provide our officers with the assets, a computer which is dashboard mounted in most cars, which mean they can be out and about, and they've got all the tools they need to stay out and about and be visible and actually in close contact with their communities for the majority of the time that they're on shift. Officers have been crying out for a long time. The product is very close to delivery, and we've got mobile data already in place across South Gloucestershire. So the new custody centres that Nick alluded to, certainly in this policing area, there's one at Patchway and one at Keynsham, and they'll be super police stations. Not only do they provide us with a really strong base to deliver excellent custody services, the site at Patchway will also hold the police station and the policing team for Filton, running off of a new purpose-built building. They really do provide us with absolutely the best buildings that we possibly could have to manage prisoners' custody and a load of other asset and resources at the same time. So we spoke around the policing plan, and just so it's there for you to see in absolute transparency, you have the right to be safe and feel safe in your community. And here in South Gloucestershire, in line with the Force Directive, our aim is for the people here to have the highest level of confidence in the police, the community safety and the criminal justice system. And that doesn't alter from our policing plan, our overall plan for Avon and Somerset, but it's just replicated here in South Gloucestershire. A few people have spoken around crime trends and what does that actually look like. So I've included a graphic here for you. The blue line indicates reported crime, the red line is detected crime, and that's a trend of crime over the last 10 years. What does that actually look like? Over 10 years ago in South Gloucestershire, crime rates were over at 20,000. They're now down beneath 12,000. That's a reduction of about 40% of crime. Perhaps more importantly, over those 10 years, that represents 56,000 fewer victims of crime. 56,000 fewer victims of crime over that period of time. A 40% reduction in crime. And you'll see that the detection rate, the number of offenders we brought to justice, is increased from 14% to over 36% in this local area. Performance we're really proud of. We're the only agency that brings offenders to justice, and we ought to do that really effectively. Sue spoke around her plan and the priorities she set for us, and I'll just quickly flip through these if you can. They were to reduce the impact of antisocial behaviour in communities, tackle domestic and sexual violence, prevent and reduce burglary and fear of burglary in the area, and ensure victims are at the heart of our criminal justice system. And again, Heather spoke around some of the really strong performance we've had working with partnership, and perhaps I alluded to some of that as I just talked through some of the examples of how we're delivering that in this area. How well are we doing it, reducing the impact of antisocial behaviour? We have a dedicated police and council team that work together in Badminton Road and Yate, antisocial behaviour officers working alongside each other to combat antisocial behaviour. We use a range of sanctions when we look at antisocial behaviour, from setting acceptable behavioural contracts with young people and offenders through to the use of ASBOs and other restraining orders. We're able to identify offenders quite early on in the process now and prevent that behaviour escalating. And I'll talk to you in a second about a couple of examples. This year we're working very closely with the local authority on what here we're calling Families in Focus, but is known more nationally as the Troubled Families Initiative. One of the criteria for families being included in that initiative, which will look at lots of pathways which divert people away from crime and antisocial behaviour, is actually a level of antisocial behaviour which is reported in a neighbourhood or with that particular family. What does that look like? Some of the work was described in partnership here. In Kingswood, let me do with the first one actually, in Dibden Road in Downend. There was a report of persistent antisocial behaviour by a group of young people outside of Anchor shops. On our own, what would that look like by repeated patrols, we might deter that for a moment. But what we were able to do very successfully with the local authority was a wall was removed that the young people were using to sit on outside the shops and became a meeting point for them. We were able to gate some of the alleyways that were behind the shops, which prevented them gaining access to a walkway at the rear of that. We were able to increase the level of CCTV coverage in that area, and therefore eliminated the antisocial behaviour which was causing a blight on the neighbourhood there and the residents that lived there. Here in Kingswood, what we've done around the antisocial behaviour in the nighttime economy. Working very closely with the local authority and our partners, we've got a system of taxi marshals. They operate here in Kingswood and also at Chip and Sodbury. We have street pastors working on the streets with us, volunteers, security guards. We've increased the training for the security guards and the door staff around the licensed premises. We've increased the number of licensed present premises visits we've done, increasing with the local authority, the coverage from CCTV in that area, and also using our PCSOs and our special constables, our volunteers in those particular areas. So what does that actually look like? Has it had an impact? The next slide begins to show you a graphic around that. The chart is in quarters, so each one of the sort of grey bars out you see along there is a year in time, and it shows the impact on violent crime in the Kingswood area. And you can see it falling year on year, month on month, as a result of the strong work we've done in partnership. Couldn't have been achieved by police on their own. Then when we look at criminal damage in Kingswood itself, again you see a very similar trajectory around crime and criminal damage. Can't eliminate the crime completely, but we certainly have had a really strong impact by working with partners and working with some volunteers on the street, just actually helping to triage some people who are probably drunk and would have normally presented themselves at A&E later that evening, being able to do that on the street with some of our street pastors, being able to offer other alternatives to people who are probably vulnerable through drink, or actually interjecting before their behaviour has escalated to violence or problems in their communities. What does performance look like? When we look at antisocial behaviour, what do people tell us who actually report antisocial behaviour to us? Well, this is the people who are satisfied, or very satisfied with the service they receive. The green line at the top is this area, North East, which includes South Gloucestershire. As you can see, about 85% of all people who've had contact with us or have come to us because they've been suffering from antisocial behaviour have been very satisfied or satisfied with the service they've received. Our ambition is to increase that and actually deliver that to over 90%. Again, although it's strong performance, we're never confident or complacent around that. The other priority, obviously, one of the other priorities set by Sue, is tackling domestic violence and sexual violence. I'll briefly just mention how the approach that we have to that. We work with the Bridge Referral Centre, where victims can receive the very best emotional and practical support that we can possibly offer through each step of their recovery, and if they wish, through investigation. The victim chooses whether or not they wish to engage with the police, at which stage they wish to recover evidence with us, or if they just need to speak to a counsellor, and if they just want that emotional support. But we provide the options, and we are working very strongly with partners to give victims the choice in the way in which an investigation may proceed. We work with independent sexual violence advisors, and again, Sue's alluded to that, but actually strongly supported by the Police and Crime Commissioner through funding. These are dedicated teams of specialists who help victims and their families move forward through any sexual or domestic violence. They provide a confidential advice and support to a victim and the family. They provide a safe place for a victim to talk and access other services outside of just those which are investigative. And they work very closely in conjunction with social services. We've also helped deliver, and it was a programme which was we were assisted with the Castle School in Thornbury, which is a programme of education called Only Yes Means Yes, delivered in our secondary schools. Very well received, but actually developed by young people in this area. And what does our performance look like there? Well, you may step back and say, Jeff, I'm not so sure about that increase in serious sexual offences here. Actually, we see that as great success, because that means that more people are coming forward and reporting serious sexual offending to us, sexual offences to us, coming forward and reporting rape to us. So we see that as people having the confidence through working through the centre, the Bridge Centre, coming forward. And you'll see our detection rate there at 33% for serious sexual offences, and domestic violence dropping by 10%. And in fact, if I'm very frank, I'd like to see domestic violence reporting increase. When I see that decrease, I worry that actually there may be people who aren't coming to us who really do need support, either from us or other agencies. So we've got some work ongoing, and Sue alluded to some of the way in which we put funding towards some of the support and voluntary agencies that can help us in that regard. Preventing and reducing burglary, I've already spoken on the performance you've seen in those areas, the overall performance you've seen around reducing crime. We work through a system very closely with probation officers working inside our police stations alongside social services on an integrated offender management scheme, which means we open up pathways to offenders now which look at education, look at training, look at work, look at employment, look at education. We'll look at drugs rehabilitation. So we're not just focused on catching an offender and bringing them to justice, but we're looking at the holistic way in which we can interject and prevent somebody from continuing to offend and causing harm to our community. So what does that performance look like? Burglars in South Gloucestershire, again, without dwelling in great detail because these trajectories are all very similar, but just look, that's 400 fewer dwelling burglaries and 685 fewer non-dwelling burglaries in this area in the last 4 years, which is tremendous success. What does that look like? That's about a 40 to 50% reduction in burglary. And in Kingswood particularly, Heather alluded to the fact that this was considered a priority neighbourhood. So how well have we done in targeting some of those offenders out there? So in Kingswood, when we look at the performance over the last 5 years, the chart speaks for itself. That's over almost a 40% reduction in dwelling burglary and over 40% reduction in non-dwelling burglaries. And when you deliver that kind of performance, that doesn't happen by chance or by accident. You have to understand that you've done something right. And I see similar performance across all areas of the force, and it is around managing those most persistent offenders, the 20% offenders who commit 80% of crime. And doing that in a more holistic way with other partners and other agencies has a real impact across those crime types. Ensuring victims are at the heart of the criminal justice system. What could you expect if you were a victim of crime in South Gloucestershire? You receive a dedicated officer to investigate your case. We employ victims advocates who are relays between the police and the people who need most support. We work alongside victim support within our police stations, working alongside our victims advocates. We have a partnership team that support vulnerable victims, particularly of hate crime and antisocial crime. I've over 24 officers now who've been trained by the Stand Against Racial Incidents, in hate and become hate crime champions within the teams in South Gloucestershire. Where we can use restorative justice, and that gives the victim a voice in what outcome that they wish in relation to an investigation. And again, working very closely with young people in schools. We've worked on a programme called Getting Caught, and also a programme called Consequences. The Consequences programme has been so well received that teachers have just asked for the literature to remain in the schools so they can carry on talking to young people about what the consequences of being involved in crime could look like. And then just the final slide here shows what do victims actually say, because I told you we will be the judges of the service we deliver. And the victims of crime in this area, in the North East again, is a green line at the top. You will see that's over 90%, almost 93% of all victims of crime in this area tell us that they're satisfied or very satisfied with the service they received. So those people we touch, those people we engage with and have been subject to crime are very pleased with the service they receive from us. And when you consider we can't always bring somebody to justice, we can't always bring a successful outcome to the investigation, but what we can do is deliver a real quality of service to our victims.
Thank you, Jeff. Right, now it's over to you. So if any of you would like to ask any of us a question, if you could raise your hand, and if yes, gentlemen, if you'd like to go to the microphone, that would be really helpful. Thank you. If you could introduce yourself as well.
Hi there, I'm, is it on? Yep. I'm District Councillor Ian Adams. I represent the Syston ward, which is just down the road. I attend all of the Safer Stronger community group meetings, and the main feedback that I get from these meetings is we've got a rural area, so we get a lot of situations where we get motorbikes on the commons, on the cycle track, those types of things, and it's very sporadic, and I appreciate that the police probably seem to be chasing shadows a lot of the time. but I understand that due to the cuts, a lot of the equipment that you would use, motorbikes, that sort of stuff, is no longer available. So the ability to apprehend those people is lessened. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention whether anything like that can be looked into.
Thank you. The strength of having a new BCU is a basic command unit. I do apologise. The new area is in Bath and North East Somerset and in Radstock. I have a couple of off-road motorcycles that we've used to tackle exactly that problem. What we do is move those assets around and make them available across this side. But as you say, it's very difficult. I can't afford for an officer to be patrolling all the time on an off-road bike in those areas to tackle those problems. But we'll work closely with the neighbour policing team here just to see if we can bring some of our assets from around the organisation to bear against that problem.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman at the bottom there. Yep.
Good evening. My name's Mike Reeves. I'm the Neighbourhood Watch Coordinator for Rodway. It's something I've been asking for a long, long time, is more statistics, more information on what happens on not only my Rodway patch, but on other patches as well, so that we can keep an eye out for what exactly is going on. Several years ago, we used to get statistics produced by a PC Sam McLeod, and I think he used to actually put this together himself, because I don't think it was computer generated, and it gave quite a lot of information that a Vauxhall Astor had been broken into in a particular road, not the number of the house, not the name of the person, just the basic information. And I've been to the Safer South Gloucestershire groups until people, I expect the police in particular, find that I'm an absolute pain in their backside because I won't let go. I eventually went to Portishead and I met Bridget Whittle, and I looked at the database that she had, and being an ex-IT person, I looked at it and thought that there could be more information disseminated out to not just my watch, but to the whole of the constabulary. I was told by Sarah Crew's predecessor, well, we were all categorically told there's no more information for you, which, as an ex-IT person, I could not agree with. Sarah Crew, what really brought it to a head was that 2-3 doors from my house, one of my neighbour's van was broken into, and a mobile phone and a sat-nav was stolen. I was told by a neighbour 4 days after it had happened. So I went to this person and said, have you got a crime reference number? Yes, I have. And at that point, I took the issue up with Sarah. And she wrote back and said, this is not good enough, we need to do something about it. So based on my view of the database that was being held by Bridget, and meeting somebody called Jonathan Dowie, they put together a report that I thought would be most helpful for all watches in the area, not just the area here, the whole constabulary, Yeovil, wherever you like. I had the first stab came out and I looked at it and I said, yes, this is great, but can we do a few amendments? And I've had the latest one out, which is quite informative. It tells me where the date that something was happened and what was taken. It tells me also if the person has been apprehended. It also has a separate section for where somebody's had aggravated crime, where an old lady's been mugged or somebody's broken into her house and taken away her purse. There's bound to be some identification, so that would be included into this report. This was the 11th of February this year. I am told that the report requires 1 full day's work by our internet team. They are juggling a number of things at present, and it will be going into production. It ain't there. It ain't there. What's happening to it? But they've sent me another copy of the report, which was dated for up to the end of August, and it makes some interesting reading about what's happening across the whole of the area. And I'm inclined to agree with some of the figures. Yeah, crime is down. On my patch alone, for the last 2 or 3 months, nothing's been going on. Maybe I'm lucky. Maybe by opening my mouth now, I should be doing that, because something will go wrong. But I still have to say, what is happening to this report? Why is it not coming out?
Well, on the simple question of the report, I mean, I know that they've internet team have been doing other things because they've been responding to a very, very clear push from me. Not that I've said I don't want your report doing, but I have said that I do want the new Force website up and running because it's been very much delayed. However, I think there's got to be a compromise available where we can look at things where just for want of an extra day's work, we can actually provide a support that will be of considerable benefit to a very valuable community resource such as Neighbourhood Watch. And it sounds very much like it's the kind of data that's also of great interest to victim support too, so I could see a multiple benefit. And of course, you know, we should be miles ahead of where we are on data. You know, we can all go, of course, to police.co.uk. It wouldn't meet your needs, but I mean, it's an example of how good crime data can look and can be made directly accessible to the public. But we don't have a particularly brilliant track record in police technology. My last job was at a national level trying to do something about that out of the Home Office, and it was endlessly frustrating. But certainly in respect of that very specific point you make, I'll take that back and pick up the phone tomorrow and ask if we can have that day's work.
What I'll do, if you like, is I will email you a copy of this report, which is sent to me, and you can have a look at it.
I'd appreciate it very much indeed. Thank you.
Take it on from there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I also say that I am critical of the fact that we don't look after our neighbourhood watches well enough. I've been to many groups, and I think that there is a common message that the residents that go complete, you know, they dedicate a lot of their time and effort. And I believe that we can do, within the police, we can do far better than we are doing. And I will take the message that you have given us on board, and will continue to pressurise the police to be far more supportive of neighbourhood watches going forward. Yes. Yes, sir.
Is it possible to either have the microphone over here or a seat over there?
Okay. Can you?
Reg, if you stay there, let me bring this one to you because it will amplify just the same, won't it? I'll try not to be too long, but it's all about crime figures. Now, I'm from Chip House Neighbourhood Watch. We get on average 1 crime committed in our area in 2 months, if the crime figures we receive are correct. We know this to be untrue from neighbours who tell us about thefts and break-ins into garages and cars. Anyway, we're not receiving crime figures as we used to. On an average, we used to get 10 to 12 over 2 months, and they've dropped right off. And we don't know why, because we don't get as little as that in crime figures. The police tell us they haven't got the resources. Another one is, we can't have someone sitting at a computer all day sending out crime figures. They don't have to. You can get them off of the internet, or I should say, off of your database by a click of a button. It's easy. So that's not true either. Now the police, they've had millions of pounds worth of computer equipment that can churn out all the relevant information required. In the last 6 months, we've had just 2 crimes reported to us in our area. If this were true, why do we need a police force? We want to keep our neighbourhood informed. The public have lost trust in the police. I stopped to talk to a PCSO a while ago. He said he was going to talk to someone in Willis Road, where I live, about a garage break-in, and that there was a lot of garage break-ins in our area. But we didn't get any information about garage break-ins to us, so we couldn't report it to all of our neighbours. We invite the police and the councillors to our meetings. Councillors come to our meetings, and if they can't, they say, sorry,
they're doing something else. And there used to be a police presence, but that's gone off now. We don't get police now. I don't know why. And they don't tell us that they can't come. Now the public are the eyes and ears of the police. At the moment, it's one-way partnership. Our comment or contact with the police is usually verbal, nothing in writing to commit to. So they can't say to us, we're going to do that or we're going to do that. They'll only say it face to face, they won't put it on paper. I had a phone call 3 weeks ago from Staple Hill to say what was my email address, as they wanted to send me some crime figures. My daughter phoned half an hour after to say she had a call from the police asking if I was there and did she have my telephone number. She's ex-directory. The police know where I live and have been to my house several times. I'm in the phone book. They know me. I still have not had the crime figures 3 weeks ago. Well, I'll rephrase that because I had them tonight. Now, the crime figures that I was given, and I'll read them to you. The 1st of the 8th, 2013, crime reported. 1 criminal damage to a building, 2 thefts of push bikes in the vicinity of Broad Street, Kingswood. That means nothing to me. The next one is on the 2nd of the 8th, 1 assault, 2 thefts in the vicinity of Magnotsfield and in the vicinity of Staple Hill. That means nothing to me. And it goes on, in the vicinity, in the vicinity, in the vicinity, which means absolutely nothing to us. It doesn't help us one little bit. If it said, for instance, like we got some while ago, and I've got one of our neighbourhood letters, but even this one, it's only got 1 incident, and it says, unknown offender had stolen a catalytic converter from underneath a vehicle, white Mercedes Sprinter van. There was no visible attempt to gain entry. Rodway View. That is more like what we need. We want to be able to identify it and get it and say, right, look out for that. If there's break-ins in our garages, we like to think, right, it's behind Willis Road, it's behind Chip House Road. And people are alerted because we can put out letters in that road to tell them. But we get nothing. We used to, but we get no detail whatsoever. And that, if that's called crime figures, we don't want it.
There's a lot of detail you've given us there. I mean, the fundamental point for me is that colleagues need to realise that Neighbourhood Watch is made up of people who want to help, but we need to go halfway. And colleagues have been in the room, they've heard your comments, they've heard your frustration. Part of this is about the way that local officers, local PCSOs prioritise their activity, and part of it is the way that characters like me at headquarters sort out the technology to support them in doing so. And your comments are noted, and we'll take them away and we'll have a very serious look at it.
Yeah, can I have one more?
You've already had a really good say, haven't you?
Yes. Would you like to come up to the mic?
I voted for you, and you're doing a brilliant job. That's the flattery out the way. Restorative justice seems to be the buzzword these days. I keep hearing it. But I am concerned that it may be a way of avoiding perpetrators of crime having to stand in court and face the judge and be given a sentence for that crime. To me, it seems a way of, I don't know whether it's to save money, but it's almost like a let-off. As long as they face the victim and sort of give the impression that they're sorry for what they've done, then that's fine. They can go on their merry way and maybe commit the same crime again and again and again. Am I wrong in thinking this?
Do you know what? I think you are actually mistaken in that restorative justice has been around for a while. It came over from the States, and police chiefs of the 80s, it's not new, it was 80s and early 90s, police chiefs like Sir Charles Pollard, who was in charge of the Thames Valley Force, rolled it out in a very widespread way. And we've been able as a service and through academics to have a really long look at its effectiveness. We've found that there are many offences where actually, particularly for younger offenders, sitting down and looking their victim in the eye and understanding the impact of their foolishness on that victim has a much more salutary effect, a much more long-lasting effect, and a much greater deterrent effect than going to a court and being more likely actually to receive a slap on the wrist and go back next time, and certainly much more effective than having endless cautions from the police, which of course we used to dish out in the 90s. So the evidence says that if you set up your restorative justice conferencing well, and if you choose the offences carefully, and if you do it to a very high standard, it has a striking rate of success and a striking way of changing the behaviour, particularly of young people. It's not the answer to every offence, and it's certainly not the answer to every instance. And there are many safeguards in place to say you can't just keep going back and shedding crocodile tears and saying sorry, because it's very, very strictly limited the number of times, and it's a very low number of times that one can go through restorative justice. But actually the evidence does paint a contrary picture, and of course there are newspapers out there that like nothing more than to ridicule these sort of soft-sounding solutions like restorative justice. But actually now I'm very much from the school of policing that's into nicking burglars, throwing them into jail and throwing away the key. But actually, in certain offences, I've certainly been persuaded and converted to a new way of thinking by something that's been absolutely demonstrated to work.
And that it is always has to be victim-led, so that victim then chooses for this. And when you look at the statistics for victims, that they are nearly 90%, they are over 90% satisfied with the response, which is much, much higher than they ever get out of court, because in court, the magistrates and the judges are looking at the perpetrator, they are not looking at the victim. So as far as it being victim-led, it has got much greater success than anything else of going to court.
You okay? We'll give it a go. Yeah, that would be great. There it is. Thank you. Good evening. Mike Openshaw, coordinator for Tyler Close Neighbourhood Watch in Hanham. I'd like just, if I first of all, by introduction, say to try and redress the balance from my colleague here. We have had in Hanham over the last few months a great deal of trouble taking place, and I'm sure that the officers there are aware of this situation, with gatherings of young people causing all sorts of trouble. All I can say to you is that the police officer who's in charge of the beat manager, Andy Cox, has been absolutely exemplary in his attention to it all. He and his team have been out there on a Friday night and Saturday nights as well, without fail, and have dealt with these situations. But that was just to redress the balance a little bit. But the point I wanted to make was that the recent problems that they've been having at Greenbank Park, which is bordering on the Tyler Close where I live,
has been occasioned by the use by young people of social media. So that last Thursday, in fact, my neighbour who lives backs onto that particular field, said there was a gathering of young people, between 100 and 150 young people, occasioned by their getting onto Twitter or Facebook or whatever they use, and dragging these young people from all over the place. I don't know where they've come from. I'd like to ask the police, they must be aware of this situation. Is there anything that can be done about it in order to preempt these individuals coming over and doing these things? It's not necessarily that they mean any trouble, but when you've got a gang of young people together, a group of young people together, one or two of whom may be fueled by alcohol or worse, that leads to trouble. And the park borders directly onto the back fences of some of these residences in Tyler Close. And they have had a basin full over the last few months. So I would like to ask if there's any way in which the police can handle this situation with social media. It is it's obviously a growing concern. First of all, it was mobile phones, now it's social media.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Did you want to speak about social media, Chief, in Twitters, or? Well, I was going to hand it across to Dom to deal with the actual issue in that area, but I'll just let the Chief talk about the work we're doing with Twitter and some of the social media.
I think that, I mean, the first thing, I'm an advocate of social media. I think it does a lot more good than harm. You know, we can often be suspicious of the way new technologies are used, but the problem invariably isn't the new technology, it isn't the communications medium, it's just young people being young people. And when I was a teenager, there was nothing better than when, you know, crowds from a few schools would get together and perhaps the word would get around in the bus queue on a Friday afternoon rather than through tweeting and Facebook, but the effect was the same. It's exciting and great fun to see big groups together. And from my experience of policing big groups, and I think you implied this yourself, you know, most of these groups, they're decent young people, they don't mean any harm. And I remember I used to, in policing in a different area, you'd go to big groups of young people, and the two questions that always used to flummox me were, number one, officer, what exactly am I doing wrong? And number two, officer, where exactly do you want me to go? And you know, they're the big problems. So I would advocate tolerance, both of the young people and of the social media, but nevertheless understand that officers have got a job to do, and when people are overstepping the mark, we should take that very seriously. We should enforce the law vigorously and rigorously. But I think we do need to approach it from a spirit of tolerance and understanding that sometimes actually different groups in society can be intimidated by large groups of young people who are actually not doing anything wrong. And in terms of what's happening locally, I mean, of course, this is where you look to your local beat teams to mobilise, to work with others, to look at what provisions are available, what space is available for people to go to, young people to go to, so they don't do any harm, and what activities in place to ensure we're conducting test purchase operations in local off licences to make sure they're not accessing booze at an inappropriate age too. And it's those two things, you know, tolerance and enforcement in equal measure and in partnership, I think represent the best way of reconciling and resolving what is actually a timeless problem.
Just from a local perspective, Mike, we'll pick up the issue around the sort of antisocial behaviour with the team behind you, because they cover your ground, so I'm sure Andy Cox and his team will bring the same skills to bear on the issue you've got just at the moment. The reason I was just getting a comment from offside there was actually our local policing team for that area actually opened their Twitter account today. And if you can beat them, join them. And the great thing actually around Facebook, in young people using Facebook to bring gatherings together like that, actually we're able to sometimes access that, and if we need to, put some comments and commentary around that, which could explain that, just be conscious of the impact you're having on residents and neighbours. So actually it allows us to engage, and it's another mechanism for us in this 21st century of actually engaging with young people. As I say, the neighbourhood policing team now open their own Twitter account, and they'll be able to join in and hopefully make some interventions in the Twitter conversations which go on, which could be causing some problems for you locally. I would like there to be groups of policemen who could gather together.
Thank you. So do we have some more questions?
Hi, I'm Scott. I'm a local South Gloucester resident. I'll start off by saying it's interesting what you said earlier on about the benefit of hindsight. In hindsight, if I'd known I was going to be stood here, I would have worn trousers and not shorts, but I am where I am. There's a couple of issues I'd like to get your opinion on, Sue. The first is with regard to street lighting. Our local council have undertaken a part night lighting scheme where street lights in residential areas predominantly are switched off. Certainly in my road, I can't speak for everybody, but in my road it's midnight. And it's interesting earlier on as well that we saw the police's mission, and I understand the police are very keen to reduce crime, but also the fear of crime. It's my opinion and that of my neighbours that actually turning the lights off at midnight makes for a very intimidating and vulnerable place to live. Yeah, I was walking through our neighbourhood at midnight, and it was a very intimidating place to be. So while I accept that there is financial pressures on public organisations such as the council to reduce spend, I think a compromise needs to be made between what the police are trying to achieve and the feeling of the residents, but also what the council are trying to achieve in terms of savings. So I'd like to understand what your view is, and if it's a wider concern, which I believe it probably is, what influence you can have.
Thank you. I think regarding street lighting is something that I am waiting to see the evidence, because there is the feeling, and I could hear by the rumble of residents here, that there is the perception that crime may well increase because of the lights not being on. But that has not, as far as I'm told, that has not actually happened yet. Okay. Now, I'm not saying we're going to wait for crime to increase, but there is no evidence that that is the case. And I'll ask Jeff to continue with this conversation. But the element is that I think that we have to be very careful that it is not the perception of what's happening in crime, but the actual evidence. And that's something that I will look at. But I'll be working very closely with the local authorities, and the local authorities did have conversations and have consultation with the police before they made that decision, because it's after all, the local authorities and the police are striving to make our environments as safe as possible. But at the moment there is no evidence. But Jeff, I'm sure, will help operation.
No, as you rightly say, as I listen to what residents just that murmur across the room, it's about keeping you safe, but it's actually making sure you feel safe as well. The decision to part light some of the street lighting, I think it's about 15,000 street lights through South Gloucestershire, is made by the local authority. They worked in close consultation with us, and we've monitored very closely those areas where lights has been switched off. And as Sue says, there's been no uplift in crime in those areas. In fact, there's been a reduction of crime in those areas. But I do listen, I do hear what you say around what it feels like, and that's a conversation perhaps for me to have with the local authority again. You won't be at all surprised to find that most criminals aren't that brave. And actually, would you like to know that actually they find it difficult to operate when it's very dark? Well, I accept you're going to disagree with me, but that's some of the anecdotal evidence we're being fed back from offenders that we see in custody. But at the moment, the figures are around where you've got part lighting. There's no increase in crime in those areas at this moment in time. But I'll take back the view here, and please, you need to work with the local authority with this too. It's a local authority decision, which we're monitoring very closely.
Excuse me, can I just interrupt? In the first 3 weeks that the street lighting was off, where I live, we had 2 crimes. One a van broken into, and this lady's conifer, no thank you. This lady's conifer tree, which was about 10 foot high, was set alight. She was on holiday, and the ash from that tree actually spread. It could have gone into the east, and then last Tuesday at 20 to 3 in the morning, everything was okay. There was no one about. At 3 o'clock, 2 houses had their conifers set alight.
Okay. If I can, I'm going to defer across to the team on the side here, because they can talk very eloquently about the work we've done. There's a really particular crime type here, which is setting fire to trees in conifers, and we've got a very specific operation and trigger plan around that.
The man that I spoke to, so I rang the council about and he said it was all about the emissions and saving money. And my answer was, how much did it cost for a fully manned fire engine to come out, put the blaze out, and we had umpteen police out there as well, gone 2 o'clock in the morning, plus at 8 o'clock in the morning, the police were knocking on our doors just to see if anybody had seen anything. So it's defeating the object.
Yeah, but I accept exactly what you're saying, but let me hand you across to the team to talk to you about the particular problem around conifer fires. But the decision to switch the street lights off is one with the local authority, which they have done in consultation with us, and we monitor it very closely. It's not the police who've turned your street lights off, but I do accept the point completely.
Thank you. It's Don Graham, Labour Policing Detective Inspector. The issue of conifer fires has emerged really, it was last year. Throughout 2012 we had 80, that's 80 conifer fires within the South Gloss area, particularly around Wormley and some in Kingswood as well. And this is a very concerning trend for the police and obviously the fire service, because we fear that there could be at worst a homicide, so as a result. I don't think that's the motive of the people that are doing it, because they are by and large doing conifer trees that are away from buildings. However, there is still that risk. We are working tirelessly to try and catch the offenders, and evidence of this is within last year we arrested 26 people. Unfortunately, due to lack of evidence, we only managed to charge and convict 1 offender for 4 of the offences. You'll be pleased to hear that this trend of offences did end. In fact, it was Boxing Day of last year where they seemed to stop, and for a 6-month period we had hardly any offences at all. Then about 2 months ago, the series has re-emerged again, and we've had so far this year 14 offences. And again, you'll be pleased to hear that the police are working tirelessly, and we have arrested 6 offenders. We currently have 6 people on police bail. I wouldn't like to say anything beyond that, because obviously the investigations are ongoing. What I would ask is that we really implore you as our eyes and ears in the community, if you do see groups of youths acting suspiciously, if you do see them hanging around conifer trees in particular, please dial 999 when there's something happening in progress. If it's not happening at the time, then call us on the 101 system and report suspicious incidents after, so we can collate that evidence and intelligence to try and bring these offenders to justice.
Yes, but they don't come out between 9 AM and 5 PM. It's always after midnight. I mean, what are we supposed to do? Stand up in the bedroom window with a camera?
Good evening, Norman Pascal. I'm the Chief Inspector from South Gloucestershire. In relation to your question, madam, about the fire, the 80 fires we had last year in Wormley, the lights were not off. So this was when the lights were on. The lights were off in Kingswood. I live in Kingswood, very dark, and I take your concerns. It is a bit scary out there. But we don't associate the lights being off with the conifer fires. We don't think there's a link.
Well, what about safety then? Because I live in Orchard Road, and you get young girls 2, 3 o'clock in the morning coming down from Chasers. You can hear them clip, 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 clip all along. Some are on their own, and it's pitch dark. I mean, what are you waiting for? Somebody to get attacked?
Most likely my daughter's with them. And I totally agree, it is a concern, and we're giving safety advice to people coming out of the nightclubs and to our kids and to our children. It is dark, but as I said, we haven't associated a link with the lights being out and a rise in crime of any type.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one more, which was regarding community payback. It may be an area that's outside of your remit, but I'm sure you'll tell me. Now, I've seen on the Avon and Somerset Probation Trust website that we do have a community payback scheme.
Mm-hmm.
My simple question is, why don't I see more of them out there? Doing things like clean up the ring road, litter picking, removing fly tipping, graffiti removal, all the sorts of things that I tend to see the local authority doing, and not the offenders that have taken from our community.
I will make sure that the probation know about that your view. Certainly, the community payback teams are very busy. I've seen them myself, and they use Twitter and they send photos of what they're doing. But if they're not being used in South Gloucestershire, I'll make that point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The other issue, sorry, on community payback is please remember that you can submit your suggestions to us as well, and to the community payback scheme, where we can make offenders come and work in the areas where you'd like to see offenders making some reparative justice.
Any further questions?
It's just a comment about crime numbers. We've already talked about problems we have by Tyler Close Neighbourhood Watch. We do have problems with Greenbank Park, Kingsford Lane and the backs of Tyler Close. We are continually told that if we want to have a police presence there when there are problems, and I know that you say 100 and 500 people sometimes in Greenbank Park is not necessarily a problem, they may be behaving, but we have had problems where things have got smashed, and we also have had this problem with the burning of trees. And it has been said that they don't usually do these things where there are houses. We have had them right next door to houses. We have had cars that nearly got set on light, and this is in the light. This is not in the dark. We haven't had them in the dark. The lights do not go off in our area. Now, on Sunday, August the 11th, at 5:05 in the afternoon, I could see that there was smoke coming up from Kingsford Lane. So we went round, we had a look. Actually, it was a very poor attempt. And the fire put itself out practically. But I did go back, and I did report it, 101, got the crime number, fine, that's all right, that's arson. A crime had been committed, but on we went. And then, a little bit later, at 7:30, it wasn't just a little bit of smoke, and this is at the back of people's houses. They was going to actually burn their fence down. The fence is actually scorched now. It was enormous, and the fire brigade were called. Now, because the fire brigade were called at this incident, does that mean that there is going to be a log number? Does that mean this crime has happened? I went back and I phoned a 101 anyway, and they said, oh, we've had a report on this fire. I said, no, you haven't. That was 5:05. This is 7:30. This is a completely different incident. The first fire was out. It was very little, no real damage, except that they were setting fire in the lane. But the second fire, the fire brigade were called, and it was nearly somebody's back fence. And I didn't get a log number for the second one, so you don't need it. As far as I was concerned, it was 2 incidents. And we are continually told, because we do have these problems in our area, if you don't report crimes, then you're not going to get a police presence, because they'll say, oh yes, look at the log numbers, no problems there, we're going down to Cadbury Heath, or we're going up to Wick, or wherever else they're going, because nothing's happening where you are. But I did not get a log number, even though I asked for one, for the second incident.
I'm just going to ask Norman just to deal with the technical part of the question, because there's a difference between a log number and a crime number, but Norman used to manage our communication centre, so you'll be able to explain it far better than I will.
Well, I've got no number at all for the second one.
Okay, in relation to our call centre, I'll just go through how it actually operates and how we work, and the log number which you're referring to. So if someone calls 999 or 101, it goes to our call centre. We call it the Force Service Centre. So all the calls we make go through to this group of people who create a log, and that's the log reference number which you're referring to.
Yeah, that was the first one.
So that's for the first one, exactly. So if we get a second call about an incident, what those call takers would do, if they haven't got an incident on the screen, they will create another log. However, if that incident is still on the screen, same location, same incident, they will actually put it on that same log. And an example of this would be the M5 crash, the firework night, a couple of years ago. That generated, I don't know, 200, 300, 400 calls in a matter of 10 minutes. It wouldn't be practical for us to create a log for each incident. So we create a log, and what we do, we append the details of the people who are calling us for those incidents. So the fact that you rang up the first time and a call crowd was created, so that's the log number 1, and then you ring up again, same location. So officers have been dispatched and sent, so they know what it's about, they know where it is, and so for your second call, that is included on the same log number. So it wasn't a case of not actually interested or not recording it, it was recorded on that same incident number.
Okay, but I just thought that the way it was presented to me was that it was just one incident, whereas it's 2 hours between the one crime and then the next one.
Well, we've not answered the lady's question. The lady said, I reported an incident, it finished. Later on, I reported a second incident, it was different.
Yeah,
sounds to me like we got it wrong.
It's quite different.
Exactly. Yeah, I understood.
Yeah,
and I thought we'll talk about that outside of here, but it sounds to me like you reported two incidents.
I did.
Yes, you may be the same person. Yes, you may have been in the same place, but they were different incidents. We should have reported two. And if there were two separate crimes, we should have done that. We're working with the Inspectorate of Constabulary at the minute to just make sure our crime recording is as it should be. Because we've got no interest. When we say to you, you should, people should report crime, we should actually have a realistic and meaningful record of crime that's actually happened on our books. Otherwise, our efforts to police intelligently will be significantly diminished. And so if somebody's reporting two crimes to us, and forget whether it's logs or crimes, I mean, the point is there's two crime numbers. That's the important thing. If there aren't two crimes recorded there, we've got a problem, and we should go away and have a look at it, and your feedback's very helpful. It's one of the reasons we come out here, to listen to people, so we can find out a bit of real-world experience about what's actually happening out there, so we can go back. And if you give us the date, I think you said the 5th of August or the 11th of August?
Oh, I've got it written down here. Sunday, August the 11th. 11th
of August, okay.
Yes.
Then we'll go and count the tree-related crimes in the area and work out whether we got it right or not.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to say, just to finish that, absolutely, for the local officers, for those investigating those crimes, we need to know exactly that there were two incidents, that there were two occasions this happened. The officers who are charged to try and resolve the problem, try and solve it, really need to know that detail. So if our systems have got that wrong, then we'll certainly look at that again.
Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions? Gentlemen? Oh, okay.
We're queuing up. Yes, my name's Chris Ray. I live in Kingswood. A couple of points. The first is that we do seem to feel that there is a fair amount of buck passing between the local authority, or rather the housing association who deals with some of the ASBO issues, antisocial behaviour issues, and the police. So people locally are not confident that the police are dealing properly with antisocial behaviour, particularly drug dealing, that kind of activity, and that the Merlin housing people who are supposed to be dealing with it don't take it that seriously. Perhaps I'm being unfair. It's something that I'd be interested to have your feedback on. The other thing is, as a complete outsider, who's Sarah Crew? Where does she fit into this pyramid of talent?
I think in relation to your first point, what we really need from the local senior police have heard what you've got to say, but I mean it's the detail of that really. Where are the housing association and the police not working together? What are the cases that have been handled badly? And I would be really interested to hear more about that, because it's not acceptable that that should be allowed to happen. But to give Jeff and his team a chance, we need some specifics, and if you can give us them, we'll have a really close look at it. In relation to who's Sarah Crew, Sarah Crew is one of our most able senior leaders in Avon and Somerset Constabulary, who used to be the boss for South Gloucestershire, and I'm the one who took her away to go and run this big project at headquarters. She's actually leading the change of the constabulary. We showed you the map where we're opening up these big custody super centres, and I wanted to get the team together. We were already behind schedule to get moved into there, so I wanted to put together a team together of the best people we had and the most able people we had to effect that move, and Sarah is leading that team, but she used to be the boss here, and so we talked once or twice about how she's been taken out of the area and Jeff's been asked to cover a larger district. That said, this larger district, large by the standards of historical evidence Somerset, actually still considerably smaller than the, or certainly not large by the standards of other police forces up and down the country. So that's who she is, and I don't want to alarm you by saying we're overworking Jeff or giving him an area that's unmanageable, because we're not.
Okay, the gentleman, yes, thank you.
Good evening, I'm Carl Lander, I live in Hanham, not far from here, and I seek your help really. I've campaigned for about 10 years now around road safety. I live on Chapel Road, which is part of the road that runs from Hanham up through to Kingswood, and you'll know that on Lower Hanham Road, some time ago, there was a horrendous fatal accident there, and the part of the road I live on is very busy, it's on a blind bend, it has a pedestrian crossing where it's opposite a Methodist chapel, it has a dance centre, it has a nursery, obviously a busy church. And so I've campaigned for about 10 years now with the council to try and improve the safety of the road. And I've got to the point where councillors say to me, I don't know the law, they know the law better than me, shut up, go away, basically. And I seek your help because I've seen cars on their roof, we've had people cut out of cars, my family have all been in near misses, friends, relatives, it's a really big issue and somebody's going to die there at some point. And as a nurse myself, who's seen many people die in car accidents, I don't want it to happen to anybody, and I don't want you to have to pick up the pieces. So if you would help me do something, I'd be most grateful.
We'd be delighted to take a very close look at it. One of the things that I said, I've been here nearly 6 months, and one of the first things that struck me when I arrived here was to discover that the speed cameras had been switched off a couple of years ago. I was pretty alarmed by that, and you may or may not have seen, but I've been trying to work with local authorities, very much following the lead from George Ferguson, the Mayor of Bristol, to say let's go get those switched on. My motivation for doing that is that we've seen what was a very long-term decline in the number of people killed and seriously injured on our roads, stalled and stuttered around 2009, 2010, and has plateaued ever since, and I'd like to get it going down again. And I think the answer is actually a combination of education, enforcement, mobile speed enforcement, partnership with local authorities to highways authorities to ensure suitable speed limits, and all manner of the variety of other tools that are available to us. I was very alarmed to see the other day that the number of people killed on motorbikes in the constabulary area is currently running at double last year's level. And I think we need to take a really close look at road safety. I've had quite a mixed response from local authorities to my overtures to try and get the cameras switched on. And at the bottom line, I'm saying to them, look, let me buy them off you for £1 and we'll run them from the police. We're not asking for any effort whatever. I've had a very good response from South Gloucestershire, actually, very, very receptive. But I think once we start breathing some energy back into these road safety partnerships, once we get, we continue to build our capacity for mobile enforcement, we're actually going to go from using the vans, which people have seen, the mobile speed camera vans. There are places we can't put them. So what we're going to be buying next is motorbikes, because we can put those on bits of road that you can't get the vans into, so we'll be able to broaden enforcement activity too. And the point of telling you all of that is to, I hope, give you some reassurance that this road safety issue is something that we've clocked. Whenever Sue talks about her priorities, she talks about how they had the initial 4, and then as a result of consultation, kind of 4.5 came in. Local officers will be really keen to take the details from you and have a look at that, and we'll then work with the partnership. But as I say, South Gloucestershire have been very good, very receptive at officer level, and we're having a very sensible conversation, and I hope it's taking us quickly in the right direction.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. And I would... Yes. I'm very supportive of Community Speed Watch, but if I can just mention to you about the fatalities in South Gloucestershire, that 2 years ago there was only 1 fatality in South Gloucestershire. That's now last year it was back up to 9. So it is a subject that we're taking a very, very close look at, and we will do all we can to make that a priority.
Bill Crocker, Bromley Heath Neighbourhood Watch. You'll never win on the communications front. This is good stuff. Next time you nick a very good officer from our area, tell us when it's happening, and do that all the way through to your beat teams as well, please, as part of keeping that communication going. Because we are busily trying to communicate with our neighbourhoods and let them know what's what, and suddenly we find it's all changed around us and we haven't got a clue. It's all coming a bit late. That would help enormously. I've got the budget paper in my hands, and we haven't talked about that this evening. I heard in the past strong representations to government, this area underfunded. Is that still relevant? Is there a way of doing something about that? Can we join in some way? 3 options this boils down to. You've done a lot of statistical analysis. Presumably you've done some in terms of the impact of these 3 choices, and that you could share some more with us so we can help make our minds up in terms of feedback to you as individuals and as neighbourhood watches. Thanks.
Thank you. First of all, let me get to the subject of damping, where we have, according to government formula, we should be having far more money than we actually receive in Avon and Somerset. We've lost over £100 million over the last few years. Now, I have raised that with ministers, I've raised that with the Home Secretary, and they have agreed that they will look at it, but they will not look at it until the next general election. Okay, so that doesn't mean I will stop. I will stop nagging. I'm a very good nagger, but that's what's coming out of the ministers. As far as the and I'll go over to Nick in a minute, because he is the ACPO lead on finance and resources and probably can give you more of an update regarding the council tax consultation. On the piece of paper, I've basically given 3 choices, only because, and I'll explain to you why the 3 choices can make sense. We can freeze the council tax precept. That has been frozen for the last 3 years. But because we've now got to find an additional 15 million, I have said that it puts over 200 police officers and staff posts at risk. So I wanted to make it clear to people, because I mean, I don't know about you, but 15 million doesn't mean anything, just an awful lot of money. And so by making it clear what that actually means on the ground, that is what it could actually mean if we froze. If I went up to 2%, and the reason that we grant 2%, because that is the cap that the government has set. So that 2% would be an additional 6p a week, £3.36 a year, and that's what we could be. That's what I could be asking the public to pay on their council tax precept. If I go over 2%, I then have to have a referendum. Now that referendum could cost us over £1 million. Don't forget, I might lose the referendum, and also you might say, no, we're not paying, so I'll have wasted £1 million. And there's no point, if we're going to go for a referendum, that it only increases by 3 or 4%. If we're going to, then it would go by 10%, and that's why I've made those 3 clear options available to you. I have been out to consultation, and I am asking as many people, because I'm fully aware that there are a lot of hard-pressed families in our area who are on fixed incomes or reducing incomes, and are finding it a real struggle at the moment. And so I'm asking for their input. And we have been out talking to as many people. We now have it on our website where people can make their views known about what they think that they can afford. But that's why on this bit of paper, I've narrowed it down to the 3 options. So if anyone wants any further questions, then I'm very happy to answer them. But I think Nick is the national lead for ACPO, so may be able to fill you a bit more damping.
Yeah, the sacrifices you make to look after your own police force. I could have been in charge of crime business area or something sexy and interesting, but instead I took a bullet for the team and agreed to take on finance and resources as the National Police Service business area, precisely to be able to inform this discussion about the funding formula moving forward. Because the bad news is that the current formula has been devised but not applied. And so a damping mechanism has been put in place. They call it floors and ceilings. They say no matter what the formula says you should get, you'll be protected from going below the floor and prevented from going above the ceiling. If they took the floors and ceilings away, effectively 200 officers, there's virtually a mirror image to this force, and it's called Cumbria. 200 officers would be lost by Cumbria, and 200 officers would be gained by us. The problem is that if they took 200 officers from Cumbria, policing in Cumbria would become very, very difficult indeed. And so I think we need to just have an open discussion with ministers about what the new funding formula needs to look like. In the run-up to an election, of course, it would be crazy for any administration to start taking big chunks of funding off people. It's harder to have something taken off you than to not be given something that you've long felt was your just dessert. But what we can do is work behind the scenes, and I am working behind the scenes with directors in the Home Office to put in place, and indeed having conversations with Treasury about how we can put in place a process that will produce a fair funding formula moving forward, including the views of a variety of police forces. Some are hit by the funding formula damping mechanism, but are still low preceptors. Some are actually very high preceptors. People in different parts of the country pay vastly differing amounts for their policing, and different forces are dependent to differing extents on the precept. So we need to wash all of that out. We're working with both Exeter University and the University of Bath to try and get a kind of academic input on what a fair funding formula might look like. And my aspiration is that whilst I don't think we'll ever see this formula fully applied, I think that in the wake of the next election we'll be able to make a persuasive case for a fresh look at the way policing is funded that will actually act to the advantage of this area moving forward, because I think there's little doubt that we've been treated unfairly. The risk, I should conclude by saying, that there is a risk, though, that we can be the boy who cried wolf once too often, and perhaps one of the reasons you see a little less reference to this in the paperwork this year than you might have seen in previous years is actually, ministers know we've got our point about funding formula, and if we lead with that point, then they'll stop listening. And actually there are other more important points we need to be making about the way that we can resource this police force to ensure that our communities are safe.
But we are the second worst affected in the country, so whatever the formula is, it's got to be better than what we've got now.
Can you explain to us why you think outside companies will run the new custody units better than the police can run it?
I have a strong belief that an organisation whose expertise lies in running a kind of sort of industrialised hotel-type business, a low-complexity, high-volume business, is going to do a better job than an organisation whose expertise lies in catching criminals, preparing case files, patrolling streets, and delivering intelligence-led policing. I think I'd make 2 points about the outsourcing or the partnering of police and a private sector partner to run the kind of bed and breakfast type function within these new custody cell blocks. The first is that successive police forces have done it and they've never gone back. The staff end up happier, the force gets a service that is as good or better, and it costs less. And forces routinely up and down the country are saving hundreds of thousands of pounds every year. I used to be an assistant chief constable with Thames Valley Police. When I arrived there in 2006, this was already something that was so well established people had stopped talking about it. And when you go back to Thames Valley, or indeed Lincolnshire, who made the move last year, they just wouldn't go back. They're getting a better service at less cost. The second point I'd make is that when you look at what's actually happening in the custody office, the decisions, who's getting charged and who's getting bailed, that's the sergeant's decision. Who's being allowed to stay in over 16 hours, that's an inspector's decision. Where are we taking intimate samples from people, that's an inspector's decision. Keeping people beyond the 24 hours, that's the superintendent's decision. So the decisions that bear on individual liberty and the way that the justice process is being administered remain very much police decisions. They're being run by police people, and the accountability for all of that is and will always reside with me. The sort of service we're thinking about bringing a private sector partner in to deal with is whether somebody gets porridge or toast for breakfast, Did they get a blanket or 2 blankets? Have they taken the shoes off and left them outside the cell? And are they ready to see a doctor to get some temazepam to help them sleep? And my view is that we've got no particular expertise in that. We do a decent job, we've been doing it for years, but actually others do it much, much better than we. They operate their contracts more flexibly. While we're very good at scaling up to deal with a crisis, we as an organisation are rather lazy and sloppy about scaling down to deal with downtime, and it leaves a load of extra cash in our system that's really expensive. I'd rather have that cash to be able to pay for officers and PCSOs and keep them on the streets at a time of substantial budget challenge. And I think that's the best way of doing it. And I think the evidence in other forces that have tried it bears that out. And so all we've agreed to do is ask the question of the market. We've worked out what we think we could do it for, and if you know the sort of people who want to do this, Reliance, G4S, Serco and others, if they come along and quote us a price to do this that is better than the best we could do, then I think it would be reckless of me not to recommend that we do it. And if they can't beat what we could do, then we should carry on doing it ourselves.
They will actually be trained to a higher level because they'll be trained to an NVQ level with some of the suppliers. But first of all, I know you're a very experienced custody visitor, Anita, so you know exactly what we're talking about. But a decision has not been made. At the moment, it is with the constabulary to look at the what's available in the market and then to produce a preferred bidder, and that decision will then come to me, and it will be my decision. But if there is enough evidence to support that it will be as good as what we can deliver now, and that we can save money, okay, I have made it my mission that I'm spending taxpayers' money, and it is my duty to spend it as effectively as possible and to make sure that I preserve as much as officers on the front line as possible. And therefore, that's what the decision will be made at the beginning part of next year. But it will be a big decision. And on Thursday, I'm actually going to South Wales Police to see it in operation, and I've already been to Thames Valley to see it. And staff that have experienced these projects are coming down and talking to the staff that are working with the police. So we will look at it. It will be a very thorough before we make any decision making.
Well, the only part of this, sorry, if anybody's not heard the question, it's not just about the bed and breakfast inside the custody office, it's about the transportation that's also in the contract. We're not looking at touching the existing contractual arrangements that exist for shipping people out of custody, whether it's to courts, to immigration centres or anywhere else. Actually, I remember I was a sergeant at the time when G4S won a load of contracts, Group 4 as they were then, they won a load of contracts, a lot of people escaped in the first few months of the thing, it was absolutely derided, it had a terrible reputation. Actually, bit by bit, that service has got better and better and better. And I remember we used to have PCs in Leicestershire at the Town Hall Court. It was incredibly expensive. If somebody went back to Leicestershire Police, or indeed came to me as chief here and said, would you like to run a SALS PC operation at the courts, and would you like to do transportation of prisoners around, I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. I think we'd be crazy to do it. And it would be expensive, and we couldn't match them and certainly couldn't beat them. What we have talked about in transport is, given that we've got fewer custody offices in the next few months, we're going to go from 12 to 4, 3 new ones plus Yeovil. I don't want officers making an arrest in Taunton or in Bath or in the centre of Bristol on a Friday night and suddenly having to leave their post with the person they've arrested to go all the way over to Keynsham to get that person booked in with the hope that we can get them back out on the streets, within 2.5 or 3 hours. I'd like part of this service to be a van that's waiting there so that an arrest is made, the officer arrests somebody, they take them to the van, they scribble down their evidence quickly, I've seen this person, this is what they've done, and then the person has been arrested, and the evidence go off to the custody suite. It's the private contractor that does that, and the officer's straight back out on the streets. And if we can get that right, we'll be doing our officers an enormous service, to the extent that if we save no money at all doing that, if we actually spend what we're spending now but configure the work that way and get officers back out there quickly, I think it'll be a considerable success.
One last question. So this lady at the end.
Thank you very much. I have two questions which link quite nicely with what we've just been discussing. The first one is political with the small p, and the second one is practical. The first one is that first of all, I'd like to commend what you said, Sue, at the beginning about independence and what you said about integrity, Nick, etc. But given that when the election with due respect to you as a person, given that the elections for the PCC, it was reckoned that nationwide, less than 1 in 5 people felt they had enough information to make a decision, and the turnout was very low. That sort of raises a question about legitimacy, not about you, but about the role. And secondly, today in Parliament, MPs are debating a bill which is being tagged as a gagging order, which will potentially mean, if it's passed, that people can't lobby on things that they consider to be important within 12 months of an election. Now that's particularly tricky when it comes to the PCC, because if we want to raise issues with you, and we are Neighbourhood Watches, for example, are an organisation, where do we stand on that? Would we be able to do so? Would we be able to come to you with things or point out things that we think are not right or have not gone well, etc., or even things that have gone well? So there's that sort of political with a small p issue. And the practical issue is that I don't live very far from, I don't live in Patchway, but I don't live very far from the new custody suite in Patchway. It's quite a quiet area. And I don't share your faith in people like G4S and Serco and people like that. They've been in the press lately. The Olympics, they didn't do very well, did they? And they've been in the press lately for a number of things that are not quite right. And so I'm concerned that if these people who have done who knows what are being transported to and from a centre that's not very far away, and potentially then coming back out into where I live and wandering about there, or whether they're being transported by a private service or by a police service, they're then in a custody suite with companies that I don't have a huge amount of faith in. Are we going to be faced with the potential of criminals being released onto the street, potentially in the middle of the night or any time of day, and wandering about? It's actually quite a concern. I share this lady's concern here with the validity of having a private company in charge of what should be a state service, or force actually. A police force is about enforcement, a police service is about management.
Thank you. Let me first of all answer the first, I'll answer the first question, and then Nick will answer your second part. Yes, we had a 19% turnout in Avon and Somerset. Do I wish there had been more? Yes. The press made it out to be that there was apathy on behalf of residents. I do not believe that is true at all. I believe that residents were very angry because they were being asked to vote for someone they didn't know and for something they didn't understand. If ever there should have been a mail shot sponsored by government to have let people know what a PCC can and can't do, and to have made that message very clear. After all, the election was in November. How often do we have elections in November? But I applied for a job. I can't be criticised for the fact that this was what... No, I understand. I'm just saying that that's what the government advertised the job and I applied for it. I think in 3.5 years' time, when there is another election for a PCC, I expect there to be a much greater turnout because people will understand what a PCC does. As far as the gagging bill is concerned, I don't have enough access to that at the moment, but I can assure you that I'm not going to close down for the last 12 months. So I do not...
Potentially it could be illegal.
I do not believe that to be the case, but if you give your contact details to one of my team, I will find out in the next few days and I will get back to you.
Thank you.
On your political points, I mean, of course you can... With a small p, you can always lobby, you can always make a demand and a request and give feedback on the services that you receive from your local police, and you can do that in parallel with and independent of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and that's a great flexibility in the system, and that's something that won't go away. It's part of what we do. In terms of the broader point about the PCCs, of course, it's not for the police to say how we should be governed, and I would offer no view about that. On the practical question, I think with the organisations, G4S gets singled out, and I know they've had some bad headlines. My sense of number one, when do you back an organisation to do something? Well, I think it's you back them when they're operating in their home ground in an area of strength where they have experience and a track record. G4S manifestly overstretched themselves at the time of the Olympics and made claims about recruiting tens of thousands of people without plausible plans in place to do so. What we might ask them to do is do something that is actually well within themselves and something they or Reliance or other organisations, Resource Group from Northern Ireland, all have a proven track record of doing and have demonstrably exceeded the standards of the public sector over a period of years, not in enforcement activities, not in doing the job of the police, but actually in doing the things that the police do rather less well, or certainly it's not our bag to do it. We already spend, of the £13 billion each year that gets spent on policing, £3 billion is already spent on contracted goods and services. We buy things from people who do them better than we can do them ourselves, and I simply think that this is an opportunity to learn from the best and to replicate what works very, very well elsewhere. And if we're wrong, ultimately, I'll be the one who made the recommendation and will be accountable for that. I'm accountable for operational delivery to the Police and Crime Commissioner, and the Police and Crime Commissioner can be voted out.
One of the joys of the accountability of a PCC is if you don't like what I do, you can boot me out in a few years' time. I'd like to bring the evening to a close. I would like to thank South Gloucestershire for giving us this venue. I'd like to thank Kate and the team for being able to facilitate all this. But most of all, I'd like to thank you, because you've asked some really searching questions, and we will take on board what you've said. And I really appreciate you giving up your time tonight. Thank you.
Well,